This week, I wanted to do something a little different, push myself to do some more kind of digital expression of my response to Trace. I'm gonna share with you here in a second the Google Earth tour that I created, and I'm also gonna attach on the discussion thread the script, so that if you just want to just read the script, that can give you a little bit of an idea too of how I responded to Trace. I hope you enjoyed reading it as much as I did. And without further ado, let me see if I can successfully share my screen here. Trace. Noun. A way or path. Course of action. Footprint or track. Vestige of a former presence. An impression. Minute amount. A life mark. Verb. To make one's way. To pace or step. To travel through. To discern. To mark or draw. To follow tracks or footprints. To pursue. To discover. We live among countless landscapes of memory. In the spirit of Lauret Savoy's book, Trace, I offer you some of my own story. I want to take you through some of the places that have played and continue to play significant roles in my development. As Lauret demonstrates, the external is internalized and the internal is externalized. This give and take leads to patterns and cycles of trauma and blessing, health and injury, embedded at different scales. I do not seek to explain these, but rather express them. This is about expression of feelings and history. Should a term exist that integrates them? Many of these feelings I share are from the shadows where we often avoid looking. I do not seek to illuminate them, but rather go into the darkness and sit with them. We start with the harsh reality that I am invasive to the continent I know as home. This has not precluded me from loving and being loved by this land, but it is a reality that should not be ignored. From a global point of view, I feel incredible connection to Earth and all the blessings that they provide. But one cannot ignore scale, especially as a geographer. Zooming in from the broad global perspective, it is undeniable that I am not from here. This realization rooted deep into my being when Tamarisk helped to provide me with fire for my dinner, despite a late fall desert monsoon deluge that lasted the better part of a day and a half. The unusually long rainstorm soaked all other fuel sources through to the inner wood. When my fingers were given permission to take from Tamarisk, the most pleasant dry snap I have heard reverberated from my heart down to my grumbling stomach. Tamarisk is called an invasive. It was brought over from the Middle East as an ornamental and then was experimented with as a means for erosion control. With no natural predators, the salt cedar took off on a rampage across much of the desert southwest of this continent. It was not until the next day, after being gifted a full belly to sleep on, that I realized I owed thanks to someone I had spent much of my initial years in the Southwest disdaining. My hate and disdain for this quote unquote invasive was really a reflection of my hate and disdain for myself, for my heritage as an aggressive invader who crowded out natives. I come from Scandinavian and Celtic stock. My pre-colonial, pre-Christian heritage and traditions have been distanced from me in place-time. Most of the width of a continent and an ocean, along with centuries, separate me from them. But I know that they are alive in me. I feel their wildness surge and rattle my soul. I am currently searching to remember what cannot ever be lost, only consciously forgotten. I know little to nothing about the lineage on my mom's side. My great-great-grandpa on my dad's side immigrated over from Norway near the turn of the 20th century. He settled and colonized in North Dakota, on land stolen from Lakota people. I do not know the exact location of this place, as my grandpa moved to Portland, Oregon, where my father would be born. Our name was forgotten at Ellis Island. I have heard my grandma and dad say that it was an evil, scary name that good Christians would not be proud of. I smile knowing it is alive in me, even if I do not ever remember it. Many names were lost when Jamaica was populated by stolen West African slaves. The slaves were brought over to replace the dying Taino population, whose dwindling numbers could not meet the demand imposed by the sugar fields. The British would fight 2 wars against maroon communities in the West Central Highlands. These communities, made up of self-freed slaves and those who remained of the Taino people, used their knowledge of the land to inspire the moniker this land still bears, cockpit country. The British were so often ambushed and slaughtered while caught in the bottomlands of the confounding tower karst topography that the British began referring to them as cockpits for the similarity in accumulated gore and viscera they shared with cockfighting pits. I met this place through my work with the descendants of these self-freeing people. Although many in this area are not considered true Maroons, I know their spirit lives on as today they fight against the encroachment of bauxite thieves, the newest local mutation of the colonizer. Iron mining was the threat and remains the threat of the aptly named home place. It was here at Voyager Outward Bound School that I was gifted much of the community building and expedition mentality I carry with me as weapons for the troubles ahead. The troubles ahead are what inspire me to be taking on the challenges of subverting while learning at and by that which I attempt to subvert. I sense most of the young people in the West are hurting from their simultaneous disconnection from the land and their inculcation of self-fulfilling prophecies of impending doom. What better proprietors of self-fulfilling doom are there than evangelical Christians? This was a key component of my upbringing and hometown, where I was raised from the age of 3 to 18. Klamath Falls, Oregon, and its surrounding ranching and farming nodes have been erected on the lands known better to the Klamath, Modoc, and Yahuskin nations. The main city itself is physically located on the southeastern shores of Upper Klamath Lake. When white settlers invaded the basin and drained the wetlands for agriculture, there were repeated hostilities, armed and unarmed, against the local indigenous populations. Multiple treaties were signed and broken as white settlers took more and more of the land. A major event was the Modoc Indian War in the late 1800s. The white settlers were forcing all indigenous people onto a reservation that extended from what is today called Modoc Point northward, east, and past Gawas, also known as Crater Lake, turning eastward north of the main fork of the Williamson River, stair-step southward and eastward, finally turning southward, encompassing the present-day town of Beatty, and heading back westward to Modoc Point. The reservation was not only a problem because it was dissolving the way of life of indigenous communities, but because the Klamath and Modoc nations had a history of hostility towards each other. By putting these two nations in such close proximity, when conflict was inevitable, when the mistreatment of the Modoc people reached an intolerable level, a band led by Captain Jack struck out into the lava beds south of modern-day Tule Lake. From this strategic location, the outlawed quote-unquote band of Modocs held off the U.S. Army. I grew up in the Klamath Basin on the edge of suburban development and alfalfa fields in a lower middle income area from 1988 to 2004. This neighborhood was and is situated between Upper Klamath Lake and what was once Lower Klamath Lake, now drained beyond recognition. I attended Henley Middle and High Schools, which are and remain on the southeastern edge of the vernacular extent of the city of Klamath Falls. They are bordered by alfalfa fields to the north and south, a two-lane highway to the west, and a canal ditch to the east with more alfalfa fields beyond. During middle school and high school, we would compete with the schools in Chiloquin. Chiloquin is the de facto former reservation community consisting mostly of people from the Klamath Nation. One of the 3 high school coaches I had in high school is a member of the Klamath Nation. Whenever I think of football, I think of the end of summer and the start of daily doubles. Daily doubles are when you practice twice during the day, usually in the morning and the evening. This meant I had full days with 2 football practices sandwiching my work at a ranch, where my main task was moving handline irrigation pipe in alfalfa and grain fields. This ranch job was the first moment where I spent most of my day outside. Growing up, I played a fair amount of basketball outside and rode my bicycle, but I also played a lot of video games. It was here at this ranch where the land started to work on me as I was supposedly working on it. Becoming a river guide was when I consciously started to articulate the lessons being taught to me by the non-human people. This is where we usually put in for our half-day and full-day float trips of the Upper McKenzie River. Eventually, my life wandered over to Colorado River, where I have guided and instructed for 8 years now. This is the most common put-in for the trips running Cataract Canyon. One of the first classes I took for my master's degree was called place writing. Cataract Canyon flowed through me and onto pages. Creative writing never feels like I am the one writing. It is what I imagine it must feel like to be a parent. You can see your part in this new being, but they are uniquely their own and have so many others in them. I do not remember much about Port Angeles. I was 3 when we moved to Klamath Falls. I got a chance to camp out on a beach just east of my place of birth 3 winters ago. My friends and I spent 5 days out before a storm rolled in and the water reclaimed the beachhead. Time spent in the cold and rain often brings back memories of my ancestors. I have heard white settler colonizing culture referred to as gray sky people. As I sit on the beach, I wonder if this defines me. If I end up remembering some innate evil within, as if I swim in one majestic, tragic circle, back to a longship plowing upstream, thirsty to tear apart and rape. Tears fill my eyes as I turn my face into the wind. I pray and remember that there is some mysterious balance between agency and destiny. Trauma and injury seem inevitable, but how I engage with it matters. Like the difference between a boy hunter who kills and destroys without respect and the man he can become who kills and destroys with respect and intention. Knowing that respectful, intentional destruction is the harbinger of rebirth and renewal. My eyes, half dried, sharpened with steely reserve. My spirit clutches axe, spear, broadsword, and shield. I feel oars in my hands and the instinctive desire to tighten legs, core, and back into watery propulsion. I turn east with leering smile.
Hope you liked it. See you in class tomorrow.